good to be here. I hope you are feeling blessed being here with us today, fellowshipping with us. If you are visiting and you'd like to have any other information on the backside of your bulletin there, there's a part to detach if you want to just leave us some information, and we'll contact you if that's what you want. Also, we put a little bit of humor in the bulletin, so in the middle section there, if your cell phone ever tells you that, don't listen to it. Okay? So you'll have to read it to understand what it says. Great day to be here, though. Great day. Let's open with prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the time, Lord, where we can come here and give back to you. Lord, in a day and age where everybody is busy and the world is so at such a fast-paced moving, Lord, one of the hard things to do is to come and just give of our time. And so, Lord, I'm grateful for all those that are here today who have come to just to give of their time, Lord, to come and fellowship with you and to learn more about you. And so, Lord, I pray as we look at our study today, Lord, that you would be honored and glorified by what is presented and proclaimed here today. And Lord, I pray that you would just prepare our hearts and our minds, Lord, to receive your word and then to act upon that word. Lord, use me. Use me as a vessel to proclaim this message. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to be looking at the book of Hosea today. And we saw last week a brief overview through the book of Hosea about what is going on. And so today, as we start this, we're looking at the first 3 chapters of Hosea. We have a narrative being given here. And this narrative is to serve as a symbolic illustration. Then throughout the rest of the book, chapters 4 through 14, we will deal with the sermons that Hosea proclaimed to God's chosen people, which have the purpose of spiritual restoration. The personal side of this narrative deals with an adulterous wife and a faithful husband. Not something that is pleasant to always talk about. But as the community looked on and observed the family life of Hosea, they saw his unfaithful wife. They saw his children and wondered how God could be speaking to them. How could God be speaking to them through this symbolic relationship here? Hosea was to convince God's chosen people of their sin of apostasy, of cheating on God and fooling around with false gods, fooling around with the things that they were to abstain from. And so Hosea was commanded by God to live out a life that would show his love to a broken world, to a backslidden people. So in this first chapter, we have the marriage of Hosea and Gomer, and I too believe that this is symbolic for you and I today. So please turn over to the book of Hosea, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 5. And it says, "The word of the Lord, which came to Hosea the son of Beeri, during the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. And when the Lord first spake through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take to yourself a wife of harlotry, and have children of harlotry. For the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And the Lord said to him, Name him Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And the first thing that we find here is a declaration of who is bringing this message to these people. It was not Hosea. It was God. It was the God that they had believed in, the God that had brought them out of Egypt and provided and protected them. Hosea was just the spokesman that God chose to use to declare and to live out this message. And I believe that there's a reason for this as well, because God doesn't do anything out of the blue. God just doesn't do anything by chance. And so you'll notice that Hosea means salvation. And what is pictured here is that God is sending salvation to them if they would only turn away from their evil ways, turn away from their idolatrous relationship. If they would turn back and repent of their evil ways and return to Him. If they would have a change of heart and mind. And the other name, and so that's what Hosea means. And the other names that we find here, they're giving us the setting for what is going on, what is happening, and the time period for which Hosea is ministering to. Now, you may have noticed, if you're a history buff, that Hosea didn't list the rest of the kings. And maybe you didn't notice that. But there's a reason why Hosea does not list the rest of the kings of Israel. And that is because to him, it is his belief that Jeroboam II was the last king with any shred of legitimacy to the throne. Of having that rightful place of sitting there, calling himself a king at this period of time. And we're going to see that Hosea addresses this in chapter 7. So, in just this verse, we have a wonderful message being proclaimed that God chooses to use ordinary people to declare His message. And even though people turn their backs on God and do their own thing, God still loves them enough to send His message to them once again. The children of Israel, they had this long history of walking with God and turning away, of walking with God and returning away, and then coming back and walking with God and turning away, and God has been faithful through it all. That's the God that we serve. That's the God we know. So God, who has been forgotten, is still showing His love for His backsliding people. That same God showed His love for you and I, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Knowing that we were sinners, knowing that we were walking away from God, knowing that we were going after the things of the world, the idols, and having a heart of apostasy. And yet God chose to share His love with us. If we were honest with ourselves, we would have to admit that we have not always done what God has asked us to do. We have not always obeyed what God has called us to do. But as we will see through the study of Hosea, God still loves you. He hasn't given up on you. And He hasn't thrown you aside. In Hosea chapter 1 verse 2, it says, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take to yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking the Lord. Here God is speaking to Hosea, and He gave Hosea a command. Notice that God gave a command, go and marry a woman of harlotry. That command, as odd as it was, and which has raised many questions, was to be obeyed. When God gave a command to His chosen people or to the prophets, they were to obey and do as they were told. It did not matter if they fully understood what God was telling them to do. They were simply to go and to obey. They were to have faith, and they were to trust Him. See, God does not have to give them an explanation for them to obey. Just as our children, when we ask them to obey, we shouldn't have to explain ourselves as why we are asking them to obey us in the first place. It should be done. And so, the same is for believers today around the world. We are called to obey the commands that are found in the Bible. We don't have a choice. We're commanded to obey Him. We're expected to obey Him. But God is not a God who will come down and force you to do it. He's not going to put you in chains and everything else like that and say, you're going to do this or else. He gives us a choice in that, but the choice has consequences. And the choice for Israel, there was consequences for their choices as well. But God, He continues on here. He gives them a command to go and take a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry. And some people have a problem with that. But God, He goes on and He tells him why. He explains why. And He didn't have to explain why for Hosea to obey, but He does. He goes on here and He says to take a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry. Okay? And the reason is because the people are committing sins openly, without even thinking, without any remorse. So as far as we know here, as far as we know about Hosea, this is the beginning of his ministry. We know nothing else about Hosea. But we will notice too that his ministry wasn't just him. It was Gomer and his 3 children. God uses his whole family in this ministry. God uses his 3 children as signs to Israel. And each time they heard their names, it caused them to think and perhaps to question, why would Hosea name you that? Names meant something. God chose names for a specific reason. You have a name for a specific reason. If you haven't looked up your name to see what either the Greek or the Hebrew meaning is behind it, do so. Do so. And then think about that. And think about your life where it is and see if it's matching up. So here's what we have. Hosea was to enter into the same type of relationship that God was in with his chosen people, the people of Israel. And this meant that Hosea would experience the pain and sorrow that God was experiencing from his chosen people who were willfully turning their backs on him and committing the sin of apostasy, of going after strange flesh, if you will. Strange wisdom. And so Hosea, he is going to experience the joys, he's going to experience the hardships. And then in verse 3 here, he says, so we see the obedience of it. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. And here we have the obedience of Hosea being proclaimed. And like I said, there are some who have a problem with God commanding Hosea to marry a woman of harlotry. And therefore believe that this is only a metaphor, that he is speaking metaphorically because God would in no way ask somebody of good standing to go and to place themselves in a situation like that. God is a God of love. Why would he do that? God says that we shouldn't do these types of things, so why would he tell him to go and to do such? It's Sound about right? People question God at times. Why would God do that? Well, this verse here tells us that Gomer is a real person, and that she was born of real parents, and that the child that Gomer is stated to giving birth to is not a metaphorical being either, and neither are her other two children. They are as physical as you are sitting in those chairs today. And yes, God had a reason. God has a purpose. So what seems to happen is I get into some really strange conversations, and the Jehovah's Witnesses wanted to give me a chance to talk with them, but there are some other people out there that I get into some strange conversations, and they question, well, God is a God of love. Why is all these bad things happening? Which is one of the questions that the Jehovah's Witnesses asked me, and it was like, the minute I said, oh, that's because people are sinful. Oh, you read your Bible. And then my lovely little daughter, she comes over and she informs them that I'm a pastor, and they immediately shut up all their stuff and they leave my doorstep. Don't even give me a chance. But here's the thing, okay? What seems to happen is that people formulate some sort of picture in their mind of who God is. And the problem with this is that it is usually influenced by what is going on in their life or the world around them. And I have met those types of people. They have a picture of who God is. But this often leads to an inaccurate portrait of who God really is. And yet, we find these people holding God to how they see Him. To the picture that you make of Him, we hold God to that standard, whether it's accurate or inaccurate. That's a problem. Here we have the children of Israel. They see the power of God. They know who God is. And yet they have some mistaken picture in their minds of who He is. And they refuse His love. And they walk away from Him to go and worship a piece of wood or a piece of stone. All while thinking leads to wrongdoing. So when people only view and understand God as being the God of love, they have a problem making the rest of God fit into their view of Him. That God is a righteous God, that He has to judge, He has to punish for wrongdoing, because God is just a God of love. And so in their picture of who God is, Him being a just God and saying, no, there is going to be a judgment over here. There's going to be punishment if you disobey me. That doesn't fit into their picture of who He is, so therefore they can't wrap their mind around the true God. And so what happens is they start rationalizing the situation. And that has happened so much over just this passage of thinking, well, Gomer is not a real person. They're speaking metaphorically because God would never place Hosea in that position. But that is why it's important to study the Old Testament and to gain an understanding of who God is. In Hosea chapter 1 verse 4, he says, and the Lord said to him, name him Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And here we have the second command given to Hosea. Hosea didn't even get to choose his own kid's name. He was commanded to name his son a certain name, a specific name, because God needed to use that child to send a message to His chosen people, His people who were backsliding, who were committing apostasy, who had turned their backs on Him. And He's commanded to name this child Jezreel. And the first meaning behind this name is that God will scatter. God will scatter. Also with Jezreel, there's a historical and a spiritual association. Notice historically, now I'll just be summarizing what's in these passages. In 1 Samuel 29:1, we have a proclamation of Jezreel. And what we have happening in this passage is that the Israelite army was camping by a spring, which was in the valley of Jezreel. Meanwhile, the Philistines were gathering their whole army to do battle. The Philistines are gathering all their army together, and we got the Israelite army just laying beside a brook. And guess what? Israel took a big hit. It was a big victory for Philistines. In Judges chapter 4 and 5, we have Deborah fighting several battles. Where? In the valley of Jezreel. In Judges 6 and 7, we have the account of a battle with Gideon. And guess what? It's in the valley of Jezreel. Also in 2 Samuel 2:8, Jezreel was part of the kingdom of Ishmael, and there was even more bloodshed. And so when people heard the name Jezreel, to them it brought their minds back to all the bloodshed that had happened in this place, in this valley. And they understood that God was going to end up scattering them. In 1 Kings 21:1, we find that Naboth was murdered in the valley of Jezreel for his land, his vineyards. Someone coveted his land and therefore just killed him off so they could have it. So in their mindset, it was a gory place. It was a place of disaster, a place of bloodshed. But then Jezreel also means, may God so. And Hosea was trying to get these people to remember who God is, how powerful God is. And they needed to remember that it is God who blesses the land, and that it is God who gives life, not these false gods, not these false fertility gods that they were worshiping. But there's also another side of that. Jezreel means God will scatter and God will sow. But what's going to happen is the children of Israel, they're no longer going to be put together. They're going to be disbanded. And they're going to be scattered abroad. But God is going to sow them in amongst the nations where they are at. And the awesome thing the thing that would be so awesome about that is if they would have repented and turned away from the false idols and everything else that they were around and getting into, and declared that the one true God, the God that they had brought them out of Egypt, the God who had provided for them, the God who protected them, if they would have shared that with those people. So we have this idea that God will sow His chosen people amongst the other nations. And we're going to try to wrap this whole thought up in just a minute, but for now, I want to look at the last part of this verse here too. And it says, "For yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel." And for us to understand the meaning of what's going on, we actually have to turn to a different passage. And that passage is going to be 2 Kings 9:7. And what we find here is Jehu gets word from God to go in and to strike the house of his master. This is what it says in 2 Kings 9:7. It says, "You shall strike the house of Ahab your master, that I, God, may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all my servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel." So here we have a command given to go and to do something. And Jehu, he goes and he does it. And then we find in 2 Kings 10:30 that Jehu is commended for obeying the command of the Lord, because it says, "The Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in executing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. So here Jehu is commended by God for carrying out the will that God has called him to do over there, for being obedient. For being obedient. That's what we have happening here. That's what's being referenced here. But yet, he sits here and he says, for yet a little while, and I will punish the house of Jehu for the bloodshed of Jezreel. So the question is does God contradict himself? Has God had a change of heart, or has he changed his mind? Has he recanted of his position? The answer is in no way has God recanted of the things that he's stated here in 2 Kings. And the truth is there is no way, in no way has God recanted of his position on sin. God says that he is the only God, and you shall have no other gods before me. And he's holding to that. And so the children of Israel, his own people, have turned their backs. They have recanted of their portion of the covenant with him. And they are seeking out what is strange. So here is what we must do. We must look at the original language to find out what is being said here. And the first problem is with the word punish. And yes, it says punish. I will punish the house of Jehu. But the problem is with the word punish in our understanding of it. When someone is punished, it is usually done because there was disobedience and a lesson needed to be learned. My son will tell you that he gets punished here and there because he chooses not to listen to what I tell him to do, and therefore there's consequences. Like if I ask him to take the trash out to the dumpster, and the trash goes out the back door to the trash can. Yes, it made it out of the house, but he didn't make it where I said it needed to go. And so he disobeyed. And so then there's a lesson that needs to be learned. You need to obey my every word. Not what you think I wanted, but what I said. And see, what we have here, though, is that God is not revenging the blood of Ahab's house. He is not revenging that. God is not punishing Jehu for destroying Ahab and his house. And what that means, Ahab and his house, it means Ahab, his family, and all those who were following him, who were associated with him, because they were committing great apostasy. They weren't walking with the Lord. And so God sent Jehu down there to go and to annihilate them, to wipe them out, as an example. So instead, the meaning here is more that God will visit upon Jehu. When he says, and I will punish the house of Jehu, the meaning here is, and I will visit upon the house of Jehu the same that came upon the house of Ahab. The same thing. Okay, in Jezreel. That's where this happened. It was in the valley of Jezreel. And so what he's making reference to here is that God is not teaching him a lesson here. But Jehu will be teaching others a lesson about not being wise, about not learning the lesson. See, Jehu was sent down to give a lesson. He was sent down to show others why it was so wrong to walk away from God. To show that God is a jealous God, that God does not want to share it with anybody else. To show them that when God says that you shall have no other gods before me, then there better not be no other gods before him. And so Jehu, he goes down and he fulfills the command that God had given him, but guess what? In the end, he was no better. In the end, he was no better. He was no better than those that he punished. Yes, God used him and sent him to carry out the wrath of God, his wrath on this apostate people, but he himself and his household repeated their apostasy. They followed in their footsteps. They didn't learn the lesson that they went down there to show the other people. God used them to declare a message to other people around them, and yet they didn't heed that message. They didn't take that message to heart. And so God is going to visit upon them the same. But it doesn't stop there either, because in verse 5 it says, on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And what this is talking about is that God will take their ability to defend themselves away and their ability to resist their enemies. God's going to take it away. They're going to be scattered. They're going to be sown in amongst the heathen nations. They didn't want to obey God and to go in there and to wipe them all out like God said. They wanted to go in amongst them and try to live out what God wanted them to do. And therefore they got sucked into all this idolatrous worship. And so now God is saying, hey, I'm going to scatter you. I'm going to sow you right in among them. So what we've learned today, in conclusion, is that Hosea obeyed God and married a harlot named Gomer. This was done so that Israel, the chosen people of God, would see that they were sinning against God by fooling around with false gods. Then we saw the first proclamation of ruin coming to Israel for that sin. For their sin of turning their backs on God. God says, hey, I'm going to ruin you. You're going to be in ruin. You're going to be scattered. And as we'll look as we go through the next couple of weeks, he's going to say, hey, you're not my people. And I'm not your God. But then the overwhelming message that is there is that it always comes back to God's love that he's saying, but there's still hope. There's still hope. So what is the point? What does this say to you and I? What are we to glean from this passage? Well, we would be wise to listen to the message that is before us. Hosea assures us of God's unconditional love for his people. They had angered God because they had dishonored him by turning their backs on him and fooling around with false gods and false worship. God has shown the children of Israel nothing but mercy and love and grace. And many today look back and question how Israel could do such a thing. How could Israel turn their back on a God who brought them out of Egypt, who provided for them, who went out of his way to show them mercy, grace, and love? How could they find themselves doing this? And yet, as we question that, there are many today who disrespect God, who chase more after the things of this world than the things of God, and forget how much love he has for them. Hosea is a mirror that has been set in front of us, and the reflection is of us doing the same thing that the chosen people of God had done. When we study Hosea, this is the mirror. And the shadow you see, or the reflection you see in there, is just like putting you in this place. And God is speaking to you right here. So if we are to avoid the same mistake, then we must remember just how much God loves us and what he has done for us. So please, do not follow Israel's footsteps in fading away and rejecting the eternal life that God offers in place of the hell we deserve. May God not be forgotten. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this passage. Lord, I thank you for the meaning it has in our lives. for where it should be drawing us, to where it should be leading us. And Lord, it is my prayer, Lord, that we would be looking at our own lives and seeing, Lord, just who God is to us. Do we have a right understanding of who God is? And if not, Lord, please let us see that, and let us come to a true understanding of who God is. And help us, Lord, to share the love of God with those that are around us. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Please stand with us and sing with us this last song. And if you find yourself today thinking about your life, and God doesn't have his rightful place in your life, or there are some things that you're not listening to about God, take time to deal with that. Ask God to rekindle the flame inside of you so that you can do as he has called you to do. If you're placing other things before God, they don't need to be there. See, anything that takes the place of God before God is considered an idol. And if you're struggling with that, please allow God, come before him and ask him, hey, take that out of my life so that I can have a right focus.